Matthew does bring up some very good points, however. The plot does have a couple of holes as well as inconsistencies. Yes, Jennifer was just removed from the story and was made completely pointless. She was set up as a part of the story in the first film, and now she's just put to sleep and it's completely pointless. However, this is also very inconsistent with the first film, since Doc wanted to bring her along, saying this concerns her too. And now he says she's not essential to my plan. Marty asks her why he brought her along, and Doc says because she saw the time machine. Well, yes. And why couldn't he have knocked her out there and make her think it's a dream there? I mean, you know, then you wouldn't have to leave her unconscious in the car all alone in the future. Also, Confused Matthew mentions why would Marty care what someone who doesn't exist in the time he lives in would say of him. And one could argue that this is because he's a hothead, but in the first film one guy joked about him, saying the guy's afraid he's gonna drown, and he chucked it off. He was assertive and defended himself and the people he loved as well, but out of self-defense and care for the people he loved, not out of pride. Also, the problem with the destruction of the universe from the time paradox isn't that it's too extreme, it's the fact that it makes no sense. A paradox isn't destructive, otherwise Marty getting his own parents together and creating the skateboard would have destroyed the universe already. And even after this paradox doesn't happen, Doc still warns him the next time to avoid a paradox for the same reason. Why? We already saw it cannot destroy the universe, so can it destroy the universe sometimes and then not other times? That's very random. Unlike the original, this film doesn't portray time travel realistically. Also, the argument this film is supposed to be a comedy doesn't hold up because it isn't a gag, it's a main story point. So if that's ridiculous, the film is just a comedy, so then you can't have any dramatic moments or a dark alternate 1985. And also, yeah, how did Biff know how to use the time machine? I'm unwilling to believe Doc can't let Marty know of his future because he decided at the end of the first film to learn of the future, and he's taking Marty to the future to save the future of his kids. So he had become okay with changing the future, and that again disarms the ending of the first film. However, the complaint that the daughter broke Marty's son out of jail is contrived because she looked normal is ridiculous. Normal people sometimes break the law and take great risks for the people they love. But you wouldn't complain about this with a guy. Many films normal guys break the law, but with a woman it must be like a gothic type. That's kind of prejudice. Normal people can still break the law when desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. So Matthew makes a couple of great points, but he's too critical, hating on the story for a couple of inconsistencies and plot holes, while it's so exciting and detailed and clever. However, the angry video game nerd is also wrong for calling this one of the best sequels ever, as an absolute best sequel should have a strong continuity with the first film, like X2, Shrek 2, or Toy Story 2. Then we have the issue of Biff. I agree Biff in 2015 is inconsistent. He's mean-spirited and rude like Bully Biff, even though having become a nice guy in 1985. And that can be because he just grew cranky over the years. Because he isn't just cranky here, he's mean. And age doesn't make you refer back to a bad person. And we also see now that he's still secretly mean in 1985. What? No, he had become nice. He acted sincerely excited about George's books arriving and acted warm and caring. And this is very called an unsatisfying twist, and it really disarms the ending of the first film. However, I completely disagree on the Biff in alternate 1985. He wasn't a representation of George's fears, and he didn't return back to cowardice because it was George that hit him, because Back to the Future wasn't a metaphor film, and Biff actually had a real personality and was a real character. And he became a coward after George hit him because he fought him head on, where Marty just had him crushed by tricking him. He didn't totally take away all his dignity. And that's a more clever and dangerous way. That's a clever trick to win a fight, where George truly overcame him physically. And that's why he only referred it back to due to an outside cause, which wasn't George's dilemma at all. So the fact that Marty prevents him from being evil is because this is an outside interference problem. It is from an alternate timeline. It is not the natural situation, and George still sets the crucial step. And also, it's believable that Biff would revert back to being evil when he had all the money in the world and the ability to do anything. Absolute power corrupts people, and he was able to become a killer, and he tried to ram Marty with his truck and wanted to rape a girl. Rape is pretty close to murder. And yes, old Biff telling him to kill them was ridiculous, since old Biff was just a normal guy, although he was a bit mean-spirited. He would never tell someone to kill someone. Also, it is believable Biff is in love with Lorraine and wanted her to marry him, because abusive people often, when they are in love with people, also treat them as objects, especially women, and switch back and forth between treating them as people and objects. It's a side we hadn't seen before of Biff, but it's one that fits naturally, and it's a deep reveal. And also, abusive people go back and forth between abuse and trying to be nice, so to the people they like. So it's believable that he arrested her and was then polite to her and then arrested her again, thus resulting in different reactions from Lorraine. Also, Biff's takeover was really creative, by having him try to own Lorraine and killing George and making her dependent on her, making her want to be abused by him, and they created a really dark, menacing dilemma for Marty. And his mother is willing to be Biff's slave, and Biff killed his father, which is a wonderful twist and makes really a lot of tension and drama. And also, Biff using his powers to legalize gambling and allowing gangs to take over really built tension and drama. So Biff was partially inconsistent in this film, but mostly well used, and also everything else is well explained. We know who the heroes are, Marty and Doc, because they try to prevent Biff from hurting innocent people. We know their motivations, kindness and compassion. We know the stakes, the life of Marty's father, the freedom of his mother, and the safety of Hill Valley. We know who the villain is, Biff, because he is killing and abusing innocent people, and we know the conflict, because he wants to abuse innocent people and Marty and Doc want to stop him. And we also know his motivation. He's a very corrupt and selfless and greedy and abusive person. So really, even though Biff might be a big flaw, that alone isn't enough to ruin the movie. Then we have to complain that the film has a lot of exposition instead of story. Well, yeah, it's an exposition film, what is wrong with that? It's still a substance and interesting information, but every film needs to have a pure linear event-based storyline. Sometimes learning interesting information is just nice. Agree it's less substantial, but less isn't bad. We see Marty in the future break his hand and get sued, giving up on music due to a car crash from a race he took part in because someone called him a chicken, and again losing his job as he takes part in an illegal scheme because someone calls him a chicken. And this creates real tension as to what Marty can do to change his future and lets us know more of his job in the future. And this very well sets up the next film. However, it is inconsistent because at the end of the first film, Doc said Marty and Jennifer's futures would both turn out fine. But here they redid the scene with him hesitating. And yes, we saw the back of his head in the original scene, but he talked too fast and sounded too sincere for the doubt here. This was obviously a different take. So this is it's so that he would now doubt it is just pure retcon with even being reshot. And it's completely inconsistent with the first film. However, Biff's takeover is interesting, as he wanted his own gambling empire and legalizes gambling and wants to own Lorraine and allows gangs to run the street. And that's really dramatic and epic. So Matthew is again too critical, but AVGN is too positive because of the best sequels ever should have a really substantial story, like The Dark Knight. And also Matthew complains we learn the same information again and again, with Marty seeing many times how older Biff gave the almanac to his younger self. But the second time we learn when he did that, and the third time Marty is waiting for old Biff to leave, creating tension, and we see how old Biff convinces his younger self of the almanac's authenticity. There's a lot of story here, so even if it were repetitive, it would still be great. And it isn't even so repetitive. Then we have to complain that the film repeats the chase and the situation of the dance of the first film, but it does it in a different way. The chase scene used waveboards and had them crash into the courthouse and chase him on boards instead of a truck. In the 1955, the story and tone is different. Marty's trying to steal the almanac, not get his parents back together, and one Marty climbs over the other one, taking out Biff's three buddies. And it's darker and more intense, so when it's repeated, it's done in a different way. The film does have a life of its own, with its own plot twist, of having to solve crises in the future, dark alternate realities, and its own dilemma of having to steal the almanac back. So Matthew's too critical, however, but it still is slightly derivative and not very fresh, and AVGN is again wrong, calling it one of the best movie sequels of all time. As one of the best sequels of all time should be fresh, like Aliens or Blade 2. Also, the story is epic and dramatic and really exciting, all which Matthew overlooks. However, it doesn't add much to the first film. We'll learn more of Marty's future, but aside from that, it's an unrelated conflict. Therefore, I once again think AVGN is wrong to say that it would be one of the best sequels of all time, since one of the best film sequels of all time should expand on the original film story and add to it, being a new finished chapter into a larger whole, like The Godfather Part 2 or Terminator 2 Judgment Day or The Bourne Supremacy. And the film also sets up the next film very well, with Marty seeing Doc being sent through time by lightning, thinking he's dead, and then being so happy to discover he's in the Old West but alive. And then how he now has to go from the Wild West, how he now has to go to the Wild West to save him, and gets the help from 1955 Doc. And it's really surprising he passes out from shock, which adds to the drama and creates an open mystery for the next film. So the plot is excellent but flawed.